Hi everyone, I'm Viktor, I'm the CEO of Kipi Interactive, and today I'm going to share with you lessons learned from developing multiplayer arena brawler. And the game that actually inspired this talk is War, a game that we've been developing for quite some time. But before we start, I also want to emphasize on the fact that this is our point of view of the everything that we've learned during that time, and also want to point out that I will be leaning more on the technical sides of the problems because I have a very technical background. Now, let's start off with the game. So, War is a free-to-play multiplayer arena brawler. It contains different game modes, and one of the key selling points of the game is that you actually play with two characters that you can switch mid-game. So you have two characters with their own health bars, their own abilities, and it's really important to, first of all, choose the right characters that work together well, and also to switch between them in battle. Now, another interesting thing is that we have a variety of objectives in different maps, which makes the game stand out. The game is currently launched on mobile as a soft launch in the Philippines, but we're also planning to launch on PC and consoles. So we're aiming for cross-platform multiplayer experience. The game started on Unreal Engine 4, and we transitioned to Unreal Engine 5. And one very important aspect that I want to point out before we get into the lessons is the fact that War is owned and operated by Niao, and this is actually one of the first lessons I want to share with you. So it's really important who you work with, especially in terms of publishing and funding, because if you're working on a game and the goals of you as a developer and the publisher are not aligned well, you always be pulling in different directions. So we're quite happy that during the development of War, actually a lot of the changes and a lot of the things that are happening in War were in sync with what we thought is best, and actually the publisher was happy to take into consideration our feedback. Now, in order to get an idea what War looks like, this is the game. This is my favorite game mode called Hunt, where in addition to fighting each other, you fight a giant creep at the center. So you have to balance between fighting each other and also fighting the giant creep. Whoever gets most points at the end of the round actually wins. Now, let's start with the obvious one. Multiplayer is hard. If you have developed a multiplayer game or thought about developing a multiplayer game, this is the first thing that you're going to find out. You have to worry about connecting players together. You have to worry about synchronization. You have to worry about matchmaking.
And for a competitive game, you always have to worry about who's the authority and what ways you have to prevent player cheating. So in our case, obviously, everything runs on a server, so you have to have infrastructure in order to have enough servers to play when there's a lot of players want to play the game. Now, the second lesson is arena brawlers are deceptively simple. Usually players compare it to MOBAs, and comparing to MOBAs, if you look at it from afar, you see that in terms of content, arena brawlers have much less content. And usually people think, okay, since it's got much less content, the game is going to be easier to develop, and it's going to cost a lot less. Now, this is really deceptive because, yes, in terms of production of content, when you compare it to a game which has 100 characters in the game and you only need 20, for example, in terms of content, yes, that's five times less. But on the technical side, you still need to solve all the problems that this big comparison game has to solve. You still need to make sure that whenever you have a big load of players who need to scale your servers, you still need to implement characters with abilities. You still need to have all the AI, all the pickups, all the UI. Still need to connect those players together. So one of the big things that we learned is that in order to make a win bonus, on the technical side, you still need to do most of the work that you will have to do even if you're making your game. Now, free-to-play right now is difficult. Competition is severe. And I'm telling you this from the perspective that before Trial War, we were mainly doing premium type of games. Right now, it's really expensive to acquire users, and free-to-play game, that's the way to go. There's no, you can't expect the players are just going to get in and play your game, even if it's free. There's so many free-to-play games, and everyone's fighting for the same resources, which is people and players. So after the last changes in ad tracking, it's become even more and more difficult. And by more difficult, I mean basically more expensive to acquire users. And competitive games usually have room for very, very few players. When you look at competitive games, there are usually one or two games that everyone is playing, and there's a lot of other games that are trying to catch players' attention. But usually you have very few players that are on top. And the players that the amount of players that usually the top three players have is a lot higher than anything else. And the next one is the one that that hurts the most. Making a marketable game and making a game fun to play are two different things. They can intersect, but they're two separately different things because you are optimizing for two separate things. Making a game fun to play means that if you manage to get a player to play your game, they're going to enjoy it and they're going to probably tell their friends about it. But if it's a free-to-play game, they're going to spend a lot of time. There's a higher chance that they're going to actually spend money on the game. Whereas making a game marketable is getting players to actually play your game, which could be a little bit different. I see a lot of indies focusing entirely on the second part, and this is us years ago as well. Focusing on the game being fun to play is essential part. You can't go without this. But entirely forgetting that at the end of the day, in order to make a commercially successful game, like what I'm talking about here is making commercially successful games. If you want to experiment with something, put it on itch.io and give it for the world to enjoy. Go for it. We need these kind of experimental games for sure. But if you're aiming to build a business and actually being able to afford to make another game, you need to take into consideration how marketable the game you're making is. And you need to figure out what does your game offer more, and that is not necessarily something in terms of a very unique play style or a very unique mechanic. Because what I see is a lot of developers trying to differentiate themselves only by having a new and exciting new mechanic. And the problem with that is that's extremely difficult, and not every game actually succeeds. But there's other ways to do this. Okay, now something from the kitchen. Trial War started off as a mobile-only portrait view type of game. So the way you play the game is that you click to, you tap to move, and you use swipes to activate abilities. So it was really interesting because at the time there weren't a lot of games that offered this. But we had an issue. And the issue was limited visibility. Trial War is a free-for-all 1v1v1 type of game. So that restriction means that the majority of our maps are actually kind of circular. You have a game objective in the center of the map, and you have 3 characters that need to be balanced in terms of distance to that objective. So what happens is that due to the nature of the portrait view, you don't see a lot of things on the side. We tried different things. We tried zooming out, meaning the characters are incredibly small, which didn't work really well. We tried changing map size in order to make it more longer and in order to try to fit everything in the portrait view. At the end of the day, what we did is we made a test with actual players. We made a build for Trial War where you can play the game on portrait mode, but if you switch, you can play on a landscape as well. And what we found out is that 90% of the people just played landscape. And from there on forward, we changed the control scheme and we changed the game. Now, another interesting thing. Everything that happens in the game needs to be indicated to the player. But what's most important is to take into consideration how much data, how much changes are happening in the game, and how fast the game is. Trial War is a little bit faster than competitors in the genre. So what we found out early in the game is that people did not understand when they're getting hit, which is something really important for an action type of game. And at that time, we had every character had their own count bar. Players could see that. There even were numbers coming out of the character each time they were getting hit. Also, the effect was good, so if you throw a fireball, it's going to explode. So there are a lot of kind of hints that you're getting hit. But we found out that a lot of players actually were curious, why did I die? Why I didn't understand that I'm getting hit. And what we found out later, and that was due to the fact that we looked at what players were doing and then asked them specific questions about, do you know actually what's your health right now and why are you rushing into a fight when you have a low health? What we found out is that, especially for Trial War and for fast-paced action games, players kind of blur out, majority of players blur out. They focus on their character and focus on mainly on their skill cooldowns. And they totally ignore everything else that's happening. What we did is, when you get hit right now in Trial War, your whole character changes its color and starts blinking, like similar to 90s arcade games that just takes your attention. You can't unsee it because your focus is on the character itself. And that actually solved this problem. So the lesson here is, even if you're showing a state change in your game and you think that's a clear indication, always test it with the player, because you're blindsided as the developer. Obviously, for a competitive type of game, you need a community. You need a community to so you have someone to play with and someone to test it. But what we learned, and this is kind of by accident, is that growing a community early on really pays off. Of course, early on, your community is going to be friends and family. These are the only people who are going to believe in you when you have a barely a demo of your game. But it's really, really important, especially for a multiplayer type of game, to test it out as early as possible. I remember in the early years of Trial War, we were preparing for Gamescom. So we were preparing a multiplayer build, one of the first multiplayer builds. We tested out internally, we found some crashes and some bugs, and we were really digging in, fixing everything. There were still a few weeks before the event. We were at this point we were testing everything. We were happy with the result of that build, and we decided to bring in some of the community to test it out with us before the big event. What happened is that after the first game, 5 seconds in, someone managed to crash the game. And that happened because during the loading screen before the game starts, someone tried to just tap on the screen and do crazy stuff on the screen. None of the developers actually tried that, because we know that in the first 3 seconds we show you what the game was going to be about, and you can't actually do anything. But yeah, someone decided just to tap on that in the game. So getting a community early on really pays off, and the community that you're going to grow early on are usually the one that you can always rely on. Even if you're later on in development and you want to test something, these are the people that are going to save the day and always be there for you. Of course, after some time, after the game is more mature, you can always create builds and test it out with the community, like a wider community that's actually going to give you more adequate feedback. Because let's be honest, friends and family are not going to tell you that your game sucks. Another problem that we knew we were going to have and we tried to fix early on is player segregation. Competitive games have players from different skills. You don't want to put together in a game players with low skill level with players with high skill level. So that's why you have leagues, that's why you have some kind of ranking, some kind of matchmaking. We knew this early on, and we knew we didn't want to compete directly with the big guys. This is one of the reasons Trial War is 1v1v1, meaning free to play, because we knew up to that moment that we need to have some kind of competitive advantage, and we need to find a way to not require an enormous amount of players in our game in order to actually start. So having a free-to-play game and actually having competitive elements to it requires you to think about these things. In Trial War, we show you information about everyone you are playing with, meaning that if we put you in a game, let's say 2 players that are, let's say, average skill and 1 player which is high skill, even before the game starts, the players with average skill will know that there is someone with higher rank than them. And in a free-to-play game, they can actually decide and combine their forces against them. This allows us to put players with a higher range of skill in a game together. So this is one of the problems with segregation. The other problem is that Trial War has different game modes that have different maps. And in some games, you can actually choose which map you want to play with, which is kind of nice. You want to give your players a choice. If they love one particular game mode, they can focus on that. However, this is a problem for you as a developer because you're segregating players on different in different segments. Meaning that if someone plays on hunts, they have their own control different game modes. This is why on Brawler you can't, at least at the beginning, you won't be able to choose your game mode that you want to play. They're rotated every 30 seconds. Whoever is in the game, we're not going to kick them out. But every time players try to get into the matchmaking and they're much with the player, they're going to be sent to the same game. That way, we are fighting the segregation. And everything we're doing is in order to decrease the amount of players that you need in order to make it to have a functional game. Because we all know, you start a game, you make a big splash, there's a lot of players going in, they play it for a certain amount of time, and then the game stops being a new game. So you have to actually keep the game alive and keep the game fresh. But as of this moment, you need a certain amount of players in order to keep the game alive, because you want to have enough players to play with. That's why fighting segregation, especially if you're not one of the big companies that can afford a lot of user acquisition, you need to have some solution for this. Since most of our previous games, not most, every of our previous games were premium, we learned that the hard way that live service games is not the same. Launching the game is not the end, it's actually the beginning. You have to have prepared pipelines, both on the content side and on the technical side for the next seasons, because players expect new content, players expect the game to change. Not only the meta, but also having new characters, having new abilities, the game changing each season. Currently, free-to-play competitive games usually have seasons around 3 to 4 months, meaning that you need to make some changes in that time. Now, 3 to 4 months is not a lot of time, so you need to also have some kind of buffer. So, in order to make sure that after 3 to 4 months, you're going to have some new content to share with your players. And it's a never-ending battle with new content for your game. Now, more on the technical side. If you have a competitive game, you need to make sure that the game is fair, meaning that you need to have some kind of way to prevent cheating. There's some solutions trying to solve it on the client side, meaning you will need a server, but none of them actually work well. So at the end of the day, you need to have some backend, you need to have some server. And you're in front of a solution. What do you want to do? You want to build your own solution, control your own data, and have full control of everything that's going on, or you want to use a ready solution. And this is a difficult question, especially if you have a big team. The good thing is we didn't have much of a discussion there because we knew that we didn't have the experience and the time to build our own solution, and that's why we're using already made solution. We're using Playtap for both backend and server end. When you're looking at backend and server solutions, you need to take into consideration whether you want to go with cloud, which is really scalable but more expensive, or bare metal, or some kind of mix between the two. But also, another lesson that we learned is that backend and server solutions pop up every few months. There are a few companies that offer this that have been around for more than a few years, but there's always going to be some new company that offers let's say something a little bit cheaper, something a little bit more focused on the game that you're making, or they promise you that they're going to build their tech around your game. Not all of these companies actually survive. And we decided early on that we want to focus on some proven tech, and so that's why we chose PlayFab. Keep in mind, PlayFab offers not only backend but also server technology, meaning that all of the accounts are stored on PlayFab, but also when someone wants to play a game, install a server, and that's also a solution that PlayFab supports. So that's kind of some optimization that we wanted to have just one service that does all of those things. Another painful lesson that we learned is that progression actually takes more time than we initially expected. This is part of the fact that we underestimated how difficult it's going to be to make a Brawler. Modern free-to-play games have very deep progression systems, and players are expecting to have battle passes, daily missions, weekly missions, and they are expecting something a little bit more deep than just play 2 games, play with this character, and so on. And all of this actually usually is taking at least as much time as developing the core gameplay of the game. So yeah, my advice is that never underestimate progression, especially in a free-to-play game. Now, here in the gaming industry, we don't usually do a lot of automation testing. And the reason for that is that it usually takes more time than actually just offloading it to manual testers. However, competitive games are kind of an example, because in competitive games, you usually don't have that much content, and the content is usually packed on. It's more easily described for automation testing, and when you have a live service game, automation testing can actually help you a lot, because it will save time from manual testing, and also in a live service game, you want to have a pipeline so that you can push new updates as early as possible. If you find an issue, you want to make sure that the amount of time it takes you to test your build is as little as possible. Just to give you some data, right now, Brawler takes us around 2 days to make a full game test on everything. And this is something that happens every 2 weeks, and we have a report for that. This includes automation testing and many manual testing. For a competitive game right now, I would say that it's absolutely necessary to have a good pipeline for testing the game. You also need some kind of support for testing in real environment. While developing Brawler, we first started just testing it on local multiplayer. We wanted to see if the synchronization between players is working well. We spent a lot of time perfecting this, and then we moved on to online multiplayer. And this is the natural step to do next, because online multiplayer, first of all, takes a lot of additional resources. Second of all, it doesn't really work well if you don't have very stable games in terms of synchronization. And the reason for that is that online developing for online games is a little bit more difficult to actually extract data from the servers. Now, what we did is several let's call it free weekends for our community on our own servers, in order to figure out whether everything is working. And to our surprise, actually, the server tech was running well, so we're quite happy with that. But we found out synchronization issues that were happening only on servers and only when you have a little bit more latency. Unreal has its own tool to actually simulate latencies and backflows for players, but we weren't able to actually reproduce those issues. So we got to a point where we found out that there are some issues that only can be tested with online multiplayer. Also, we found out another issue. If you submit a game to one of the stores like Apple or Google, you don't have actually a very, very good way to ensure that these players are not going to continue the game after the free weekend. Yes, on Apple it's a little bit more secure, but you're not really sure if the player doesn't control a jailbreak device. On Google, they just say, okay, that's not our business. So we need to implement a way to stop players playing the game after a weekend. And it's not because we want them to stop playing the game, but because we want to make changes on the server. We want to upload a new build, test it out, and push it together for the next test. So we implemented that. That's kind of a trivial thing to do. And it started working, but then we found out during the next test that we want to make a small change that's going to improve the lives of players. We wanted to make it fast. And we didn't have to do this because we found out that, okay, we have only one version of the server online, and if we want to make another one, yes, we can test it locally, but we know that some of the issues actually happen only on online servers. So we have two choices. One is to stop the game for a certain amount of time, test it out ourselves, and then release the update. But for a weekend type of test, that just doesn't work because we don't know whether it's actually going to take us a few hours or a few days to solve this. So what we ended up doing is just ignoring this issue. And after that, what we did was we implemented several pipelines in which we can have different servers on the server side. We have one that is live, and we have several development servers that we can test while players are actually playing the game. With that in mind, we can always be sure that the version that we're pushing is actually tested with the real environment, so with online server that the players are actually going to use afterwards. Yeah, the next one. As I said, local multiplayer is absolutely necessary, especially in the beginning of development. You need to have a way to test your game as early as possible. Also, local multiplayer is the only way you can test the game on conventions, for example. Because if you bring your game on an event like this and expect that you're going to have a good internet connection and players are going to enjoy the game, you'll be wrong. Currently, there's hundreds of people in this room, and the net is going to be congested. So they're going to get a terrible experience, and you don't want that from a first player experience. On the other hand, we found out later on in the development when we pushed more on the features on the back end that if you don't have any internet connection, you have to kind of copy the data that the players have locally on a safe game, and it kind of becomes double work. What we ended up doing is at some point we said, okay, this is important. We have to make some sacrifices here. What we ended up doing is there isn't a way to play the game locally at the moment. So if you don't have any internet connection, you're just not connected to the server, and it's not going to work, even if you want to test it out. But what we did was we separated the logic for the backend and the logic for the server. So if you want to play Brawler at the moment, you cannot play it without having any internet connection. But when we're at a convention like this, what we do is we, first of all, have a development build in which you can play locally with each other, but you still need to be connected to the server. And what we found out is that even the little connection that you have with hundreds of people around you is enough so that you can get the data from the back end. But then we use either our own dedicated server or dedicated router so that we connect the players and the actual synchronization happens locally. And I think that's pretty much it. I think now it's time for questions.
Yeah, I was actually wanting to ask something right at the beginning. You explained that having this game developed is expensive. How do you initially get finance for such a game? Do you get a contract with the publisher for some advance payment? Or is it something that you, let's say, you save money and then you make the game?
It really depends on what your situation is, but that's why I wanted to start off with the fact that the game is all been financed by Interactive. So we're the developers of the game. We're quite happy with the freedom that they have given us in terms of suggestions and things that go into the way the game is shaped. But I can answer you not from experience from this game, but because the game is not financed by us. So you have two ways to do this. Either you get some resources and do a demo or vertical slice on your own in your own time, or you try to find someone willing to invest in you as a company or in you as a project. To be honest, right now in the current climate, it's extremely difficult to get funding for anything before a vertical slice stage. So my advice would be, if you want to find funding for your game, demo is just the bare minimum. Vertical slice is good to have. I know it sucks, but this is the situation right now. I'm not happy with it either. The other thing is, if you look at VCs to get investment in your company, then yeah, that's also an option. VCs are looking for talented teams to invest in their companies, but then you have to give equity from your company.
It's like Shark Tank, for example.
No, not really. But yeah, you need to get. You need to provide something to VCs in order to get investment.
Thank you. Yeah, I see there are questions on the front market.
How is it different today with VCs than it is with publishers? Are you doing it the same pitch?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
So you said you can look for VCs for your game, yeah?
Yeah.
To invest in the game. But isn't that the same as obviously it's not the same as a publisher, but are those two different options? You can look for VCs or you can look for a publisher?
Looking for a VC, looking for a publisher is different. VCs are looking to invest into companies. They are looking to get equity from a company. They are looking mainly at the team because they usually invest quite early. When there's still not a product, there's still no traction, they look at what the team is and try to project what they can do in the next, let's say, 5-10 years in the future. Publishers are looking at projects, whether that project has a chance to be a success, and look for basically for teams that already have some kind of experience and some kind of traction. Usually, you can get a VC much earlier than you can get publisher interested in your game and team. But the big difference is that VCs are looking at teams, publishers are usually looking at projects. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, how do you look for VCs?
How do you look at this? Well, the easiest thing is just you look at search conventions. There are lists online for VCs that are interested in gaming, and you start cold calling or you try to get some connections. So usually VCs and publishers will be happy to talk with you, especially if you have something promising. I don't think that there is this great barrier between developers and publishers and VCs. What you need is a good pitch and just contact everyone.
So even though it's accurate games to develop, you still need to figure out the monetization. Have you figured out your monetization? Because it's free-to-play game that's our market, you still need this crucial segment.
Yes, actually, monetization is something that it's good to figure out early in the game because it gets more expensive the more you invest into the game. Free-to-play competitive games usually have cosmetics and other processes and monetizations, and this is the main thing that we have in Brawler. When you know that this is the content that you're going to sell, you need to make your pipelines, production pipelines, to actually support large amounts of content specifically for that player, specifically to have enough content so that you can actually make a financially successful game. But yeah, you have to think about this as early as you start thinking about your game.
And there's one more question here.
First, I want to ask about the word of mouth and, asking your friends for playtesting during the community. I just want to ask, do you think you had any marketing success in that time, or was it just more getting aware from playtesters throughout the process, or do you think this influenced your game as its popularity?
The amount of people you can get early on is very small to the amount of people you actually need. You need to, for a competitive game, you need millions of players playing the game. That's basically don't have millions of friends to ask for a favor. Basically, at the beginning, you're asking for a favor. Can you help me? I don't know if this game is going to be for you, but can you try it out? Can you play something similar? Can you try out the game for me? I don't think that it helps a lot in terms of overall global success for the game, but it really helps on the early days. This is why I emphasize that it helps early on a lot. So I don't think you can make a financially successful game just promoting it to your friends and with word of mouth. So
yeah, okay, that was my question. And the other one was about the segregation of players and matchmaking. And first things first, I think this is really cool, the idea that you can make people gang up on stronger ones, but more about the game mode, because in other games, for example, in Legends, I think there is a good example where it's not so much about the skill level, but about the how casual or tryhard other people are playing. And in the different game modes, you often see differences in whether or not the tryhards are playing them or just the casual players. If you experiment, the selection of the mode, you said that at the end you have them assigned at random from the matchmaking, but would you say, did you experiment some stuff with the players selecting what game mode they want, and how did that affect matchmaking? Did you notice any game modes that were more casual or more tryhard, or in any other dimension of players can be that make game more balanced or less?
Let me see if I understand it correctly. you're saying that some players might, with different skill levels, might prefer a specific game mode. So why not choose that game mode more often? Give them the option to choose that game mode because they're not going to play the other ones as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less, but also like mentality, especially the thing that some people like really want to win, some are like, whatever, I just want to play game fun, and some modes are more fun, and some modes are more competitive.
Yeah, this is a possible scenario, but we don't have the data to confirm this. Games like League of Legends, they do have the data to confirm this because they've been gathering data for a long time and they have millions of players. Doing something like this will require a lot of resources to test this hypothesis. That's why we do the safer thing, which is just don't segregate players. I would love to gather more data and figure out what exactly the players want and to give them that opportunity. But to me, that sounds like risky and a lot of additional work in order to test a hypothesis that we're not really sure is going. And when developing a game, you also have to take into consideration what risks are you taking and are they worth it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, is this going to make the game better for the players, and the amount of work that you put into this is going to be worth it somehow.
Thank you once more. Please round of applause.